This is the Spiritual Download. My name is Kyle Hilding. Today, my interview is with Harri Aalto. How's it going, Harri?
Going great. Nice to be here.
Well, I'm going to start looking at Harri's website here. I'm going to read the first couple paragraphs of his About page, and then I'll have him respond just to learn a little bit more about his background here. It says, quote, "My family moved to Canada from Finland when I was 5. From this time, I clearly remember an experience that started developing where I could see an unmoving sphere or bubble of comfortable light or consciousness that surrounded my body. If I moved my hand outside this safety net, it looked somehow darker, and I would draw it back to safety. In this space, I always felt that I could do no wrong, since I was just flowing along without making any effort." That's just the first paragraph. I don't know if you have a response for there, Harri.
Well, it's kind of interesting. It kind of sounds a little bit flashy, but, to a kid, nothing is flashy. It's just happening, right? It was a very nice, I didn't always like school, so this bubble of mine was actually very useful to go into during the class. But it sounds like a bubble, but it was more like a consciousness that was around me. And it wasn't that different than what I had later on in life too, other than I knew what I was experiencing.
Okay. And then the next paragraph says here, "As I grew older, this experience expanded and remained abstract for many years. I, of course, thought nothing of it, even though it was obviously a very basic aspect of my existence. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I started experiencing what can only be described as a mixture of intense energy and overwhelming happiness. Every day I would have to leave the house and run and walk around the block for several hours until this was manageable again."
Well, yeah, I remember that period, and I still have that, but now it's more constant rather than going in these highs and lows. And I didn't really know what I was experiencing in those days, but I'd have to say that feeling of intense happiness or this kind of bubble that was around me expanded into a sense of self-awareness that I have now. So it's not all that different, only it's an expanded feeling of the same experience. And I'd say if there were the blissful experience or the joyousness that's inside comes from having that self-awareness that's constantly there. They're connected somehow. So there's a feeling of self-awareness inside, and that awareness has this spark in it, or this connectedness, or this centered feeling to it that has a blissful quality to it, like that.
Okay. Is that similar? I don't know if you know the phrase Sat Chit Ananda. Are you familiar with this phrase?
Yes. Well, Satchitananda is a way to describe, if you wanted to separate into 3 parts the experience of self-awareness, you'd say that's absolute bliss consciousness. So those are the qualities of the self. And ancient teachers use those terms to make the experience of self-awareness maybe more understandable. It puts a little bit of intellectual understanding, but they're more like qualities of the self, qualities of self-awareness, like that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get more in detail with that later, but I was just wondering if from your experience, if like having the sense of consciousness, does that necessitate that it means that bliss comes with it? I was just kind of wondering if you experienced that when you were younger.
Self-awareness by itself is very quiet. It has the potential of, let's call it, the potential of having a bliss quality to it and a knowledge quality to it. That self-awareness has a quality of knowingness to it, and you could call that the knowledge aspect. And that knowledge aspect of self-awareness is lively. That liveliness has a blissful, very quiet, blissful, expanded quality to it, right? And that is still there. I had it as a kid and I have it now. But it's very expanded and very centered. It's not like overpowering, like I described when when you read that thing about I'd have to go run around the block. I don't have to go run around the block anymore.
Okay. Well, I'm going to continue here. Uh, I would have long, grand insights that I felt completely unable to express out loud, along with apparently extended physical abilities, foresight, and streams of vision I could not explain. The school I was attending at the time insisted that I demonstrate these physical abilities on stage. No one, including me, could understand how I could jump so high. People felt that I was in the air just a little too long for my own good. I noticed in high school that I never actually fell asleep at night, and that nights and days just blended together uninterruptedly. This went on for years. When I would wake up in the morning, I felt like I was falling asleep, and when going to sleep at night, I would seem to wake up. All right, could you kind of expand on that for us?
The This experience of self-awareness that I um, had a quality of lightness to it, physical lightness. And it made me feel at times, made me feel like I felt very light physically, so I could jump a little higher than maybe I should, because people say, oh, look at that guy. What did he just do? And, and, but it came from that self-awareness, and this conscious self-awareness that I had was there at night as well. And my nights felt like, I closed my eyes, at 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'd feel like I'd open them 2 minutes later. But it seemed extremely normal to me, except that there didn't seem to be any time lapse at night. I seemed to be awake the whole night. And that gave a feeling that my experience was one long day. So the nights didn't go dark on me. They stayed bright. They stayed like more or less like my days. Does that make any sense to you? I think everybody has a little bit of that feeling. If at night, if in the morning you think about what did you experience at night? Maybe you had some dreams, or maybe you had this, or maybe you had that. But how different is that really from the day? My experience was that I felt there was almost no difference, if any difference at all, between my nights and my days. I had the same self-awareness, sort of somebody turned the light on almost when I went to sleep, and then dimmed it down a wee bit when I woke up in the morning. And then I just continue with my day.
So for you, was the sleep state almost like more normal or interesting for you than the day state?
You could say that it felt more, I felt more awake when I wasn't physically active than I did during the day, where I was in this more abstract field of light. At night, I was in a more concrete field of light.
And are you talking about the dream state, or are you talking about something even more profound than dreaming?
The dream state was within this experience. They were together. They were always together. You could call it, I was kind of watching my dreams, as it were. Yeah, that's hard to put into words, but let's say I was watching my dreams from within this field of light that I was experiencing. From within
Okay.
it. It was
So
like,
go ahead.
like if you go out for a walk at night and you have a flashlight, and you turn it on, suddenly you can see what's out there in the dark, kind of like that.
So obviously you wouldn't like forget, because it seems like for me, for example, when I wake up, I almost forget what was happening while I was sleeping. But for you, would you almost like remember most of it?
Yes, and now my experience is, I don't experience much difference between my nights and my days. And what I experienced as a kid is pretty well what I experience now, is that my nights appear to be very similar to my days. My dreams seem real. If I have self-awareness, I'm aware of the self-awareness. The only difference at night is during the day, you can choose your thoughts. At night, you can't. They're just coming. Whatever's coming is coming, right? Your dreams are coming, your thoughts are coming, self-awareness is coming. Whatever I'm having at night is there, but it seems almost identical to my days, like that. Which kind of, and to put it into perspective, it's satisfying. It's not unusual to me. It's like I don't lose consciousness when I close my eyes. in a sense, I gain consciousness a little bit. And then when I wake up in the morning, it's just uh, um, things, I can't say that it gets any less bright anymore. I'd have to say that there's a transition going into sleep and a transition coming out of sleep that isn't a transition at all.
Okay. And just one more question. Is it now that you maybe have researched a little bit or maybe dived deeper into your own experience, do you know or would you be able to explain what that is? Like, do you have a term for what you were experiencing when you were younger?
Well, now looking back on it, I'd say, the difference between uh, self-awareness and conscious self-awareness, there's a difference. You know you're having some experience of expansion or light. Everybody has self-awareness to some degree. That's what makes life life. Now, uh, the awake experience means you're having that experience consciously and you're having it all the time. So I'm not saying that as a kid I was awake, but I was aware of this field that was around me and that was in me, and I was consciously aware of this self, this expanded field of light.
And obviously this expanded field of light has nothing to do with like mental human capacities because I mean you experienced it when you were a kid and you didn't have all of these like philosophical ideas in your mind.
If you're asked, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it wasn't intellectual in any way. It was just happening. It was like a perception, let's say, you're walking down the street and you're seeing stuff. You can't fake it. You're seeing a car, you're seeing a tree, you're seeing this. So a kid just sees what a kid sees, right? So there was a perceptual element to it. There was
Do you think kids almost have an advantage towards like seeing this expanded field of light than adults who are kind of bombarded by ideas?
absolutely 100%. I mean, I think almost all kids go through a phase where they see subtle aspects of the self. They don't know what it is. They don't talk about it. They're not intellectual. You just have this field of innocence, let's call it. It's not, no kid is really intellectual, right? You live for the moment, right? You just do what you do and you have a good time if you have a nice life as a kid. And yes, kids have the definite advantage, and the longer you can keep that innocence, the more that self-awareness comes into even adult life.
Okay, yeah, we'll dive into that a little bit deeper too. Let me just kind of continue here.
Okay.
When I was a young adult, I started TM. Then my personal experience really took off. Is TM, is that transcendental meditation?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
I started first intuiting, then hearing and seeing the subtle fabrics of the quietest levels of my own consciousness, pure abstract knowingness. From within, its own nature revealed its unified, wonderful structure of wholeness. For a number of years, I expressed these perceptions of more subtle levels of creation in watercolor and oil paintings and in sculpture. Throughout my life, I continued to work in the fine and decorative arts field.
Yes, so I started TM when I was about maybe my mid-20s, and as you can tell, that was quite a long time ago. And I'm still doing it. I'm still meditating. What I noticed that I already had this self-awareness before I started meditating, before I started TM. And when I started doing TM, um, it kind of all stabilized, or how would I say it? The sense of the self became more lively. As soon as I started doing these techniques, it wasn't so flat. The pure consciousness wasn't just a field of light or a field of silence. It became a lively field. I could actually see what was happening in the silence, what was happening in the subtle levels of consciousness. And I could see a structure to my consciousness. I could actually see what was going on. And if I were to describe it now, looking back on it, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, that I was seeing the fine mechanics of consciousness becoming conscious, and that consciousness becoming, you know, I could hear a sound within that consciousness. I could see a sight, I could see a structure or a vibration in that consciousness. And it seemed very intelligent to me. It's like, and that intelligence had a form to it. Every point of my consciousness expressed into a point. You know, I could look at my consciousness, see a point of light, and I could see that point of light becoming a form. Um, and there was thousands and thousands of these points. There was a shimmer to the consciousness, and I could see the creative process of the mind and the heart expressing itself within myself. And that became very prevalent in the longer I meditated. After a few years of meditation, I was having very, very flashy experiences inside, and these experiences were there. Let's say they were there 24 hours a day, and it wasn't just silence, it wasn't just light, but I would have these celestial experiences as well.
Can you describe what you mean by celestial experiences?
I know you'd ask that.
Because that just sounds amazing.
Well, the structure of consciousness isn't just silent. I mean, there's something there. There's consciousness is a field of stillness, and within that stillness, there's a subtle level. This subtle level, if you can actually see what the subtle level of your consciousness is, it has a celestial quality. It's very beautiful, it's very blissful, and there's forms there. There's, let's say, there's operative laws of nature like fire, water, air, mind, ego, senses. There's all of this activity going on, and you can see it. And I'm kind of trying to avoid talking about the devata or the beings that exist on this level, because they're not significant in and of themselves. They're only significant because they're your consciousness functioning. So these laws of nature have personifications. These personifications, when the mind wakes up, can be seen. But what's really significant to the experience that I had and where the bliss came from was from the self-awareness itself, from the stillness, from the liveliness of that stillness, that intelligence of the stillness of my own consciousness. That intelligence had a form, or many, many forms. And these forms were the operative laws of nature. These operative laws of nature were had personifications, which I could see. They were around me, in me. I was in a divine environment or a celestial environment, as well as my regular life. They did not obscure each other in any way.
So it sounds like you kind of were experiencing three different levels, because I mean, most people obviously they experience this physical,
Yes.
like day state, but then it sounds like there's this other realm where it's much more like energetic, or it's full of maybe light that isn't maybe physical light, but it's equally here. You could perceive it if you open to it. And then the last level, it's complete silence or complete openness. Is that what you're saying, are kind of the three
Very well
levels?
put. I like the way you put it. Yes, you could easily say there's three levels, but I would also put the daily life, regular life, what you see with the senses, as one level. And then I'd say there's the subtle level of the senses. It's still the senses seeing, but now it's inside. And those senses begin to see the connection between the outside and the inside. And seeing these connections of the outside your daily life with what you're experiencing inside, and seeing those two levels in relation to self-awareness or the silence or the stillness, those three levels together, I see those levels all the time, and they're there as as one kind of, let's call it see-through, know-through consciousness that is lively within itself. And I see the trees and the roads and the cars no different than anybody else, but I also seeing those that my daily life through kind of a transparent screen of a celestial nature, a beautiful nature. And this beauty has to do with light and the energy and silence, like that. That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool what you said. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it sounds like this has this subtle realm of reality that you perceive. Has that motivated you to become an artist? Because it sounds very artistic in the way that you say it. That there's kind of
Very visual.
light that you can perceive that's more energetic and less physical. I don't.
Yes, but I wouldn't put it, it kind of made me become an artist when I was older. I was already doing art when I was a little kid. You know, I was trying to sketch what I was seeing inside. And then I got maybe a little better at it as I got older. But I think any artist is pretty well born an artist, or if you're a musician, you're pretty well born a musician, or whatever. You know, you're a teacher, you have that in you already. It's not like you can develop it, of course. You know, if you want to you become physically strong, you have to start lifting weights, do something, you know. And inherent within the muscles, right, is the ability for them to get stronger. Inherent in consciousness, if you do something like meditation or self-inquiry, there's the ability for consciousness to become more lively, more subtle, and you begin to see that. And if you're a visual artist at heart, then you're going to start trying to paint that or draw it or whatever. Yeah, that's right.
When people are pursue meditation, which level do you think they're trying to strive for, or what level do you think they should strive for?
You know, that I would like to keep it really simple at this point, but you know, because everybody, you know, you got this whole world of what, 6 billion, is it 6 billion, 7 billion people now on Earth? That's a lot of people. All of us want to be happy, don't we? Everybody wants happiness, you know, whether you're going skiing or surfing or teaching or artistic or whatever you're doing, you're looking for happiness. The people who start meditating or doing self-inquiry into, you know, maybe they get attached to TM or Zen or whatever, prayer or Christianity, whatever, we're all looking for a kind of contentment, or even though you could say we're looking for meaning to life, we're looking for that meaning because we want to be happy and we want to be content and we want to know where we're going. I don't think anybody's any different than that. Believe it or not, you know, somebody climbing a mountain is not just looking for satisfaction, they're looking for a good time. On a subtle level, a good time is happiness. On an even subtler level, that happiness is self-awareness. And some people realize that and some people don't. Not that many people, you know, are going after you know, hitting the target, as it were, right?
Yeah, it seems like people get very, very happy once they figure out who they are. Since I'm a teacher, I know I teach a lot of teenagers who are almost very, very lost and almost have no idea who they are. And I think how the society is structured, it tells society tries to convince them that they're something that they aren't. And I'm wondering if for you is is spiritual practice, is that really the ultimate thing, is to learn more about who you are?
That's a good way to put it. You know, the first stage of experience, that if somebody starts to meditate or understanding what they're experiencing inside, there's this stillness in there, and the stillness is gratifying, and it has a blissful quality to it. But you also notice there's more to it than just stillness or expansion, and you want to know what that is. So you start thinking about it. You have some self-inquiry after the meditation. You say, well, what did I experience? Well, there was some light there. There was some movement of that light. There's some bliss there. There was sort of some kind of knowingness there. And you go after this. Some years you meditate, and you start seeing more subtle aspects of consciousness and what these subtle aspects actually are. And there's a satisfaction to understanding and knowing that you are this eternal, infinite being that will go on and on and on and on. So it attracts you to go towards it. Yes, like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Because I think from what I've experienced, the more I've learned about who I am, and not just like my true nature, like the absolute or something, but also like who I am as a person, that kind of leads towards a sense of meaning and purpose in life. I don't know if did you experience that as well?
yes, self-awareness is a purpose in life. You know, you kind of conscious self-awareness, you know, there's this term, self-realization or enlightenment, you know, and I don't hardly like using that word, but conscious self-awareness, when it's permanent, is actually self-realization. Self-realization is a knowingness or a feeling in the heart that's permanent. It's there all the time. It's 24 hours a day, and there is a quality of quiet bliss to it, and that quiet bliss, or you know, I almost hate using these words, but you know, this this quiet happiness or very quiet joy does come with the realized state. And the difference between realized consciousness and a consciousness that is not realized is not as big as people think. It's because it's a natural state. It's already there. It needs to be gone after, and at some point, understanding and inner experience becomes bright enough that you say, "Ah, you know, I don't even know if I want to go there." But I watched a number of people wake up, you know, just spontaneously, maybe a dozen or so. And the first thing that people who wake up say is, "Wait a minute, I've always had this experience. So what changed?" Because something significant happened. But what was that significant thing that happened? They ask themselves that first, and 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 maybe ask me, and you know, I try to explain, but it's a very personal experience. It's very inner to themselves, and there's um, I mean, they could even ask things like, "Is this all there is?" And I'd say, "Yeah, probably." And then it grows, and then you know, the experience of self-awareness is very simple. The benefits that you can be quite flashy. That's different. The happiness or the visions that you might see or whatever might be very flashy, but the experience itself is very similar to people. There's a centeredness that happens, a knowledge that happens, and you know something you didn't know before. Maybe you don't exactly know what you know, but you know something big and unbounded like that.